Good morning, and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. The UN climate negotiations ended abruptly, or rather, in a very demoralizing and raging for the apologists of the climate change. And Canada played a major role in that. As a matter of fact, this failure was very well known, as I talked last time. After Doha negotiations, none of the negotiations has been successful. Paris Accord, Oslo, they were Kyoto, they were all hailed as path breaking agreements, and all of them ultimately met their expected grave. The Madrid conference, if we take the history from Kyoto to Madrid and from Doha in between, as I said, Doha was the only time when something really worthwhile was discussed. And that was thanks to the astute, capable leadership provided by Prime Minister Harper. But the countries gathered in Madrid for COP20 were unable to agree even on the main objectives, and the negotiations failed, and the most important decisions were kicked down the road for next year's meeting in Glasgow in Scotland. Who knows what happens in 2020? 2019 has been bad. And the collision of the countries seeking higher ambitions was blocked. By whom? By a group of big polluters who insisted on accounting tricks such as hot air credits, expecting help for nations suffering the impact of the climate change. And that's justified to a great extent. Many countries do not contribute to the air pollution, and yet they are victims of that. And many victims are themselves the major polluters. The largest polluter in the world is India and China. And the main sufferers are the other countries: Australia, Brazil, Chile, name it, and they are there. But one of the major breakdowns centered around Article 6, which covers international accounting for climate pollution and credits between countries. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers has been making some suggestions that Article 6 should focus and should be used to give Canada credits for exports of LNG and other fossil fuels. Well, the high ambition coalition includes countries like Marshall Islands. And Marshall Island is one country I have sympathy for that country, which is threatened by the rising sea levels. And there are some European countries which just this week strengthened their own climate plans. Now, when they have their own climate plans, which are not in sync with the global plans, they have no meaning. As a matter of fact, this is one area, the climate change, where if some action has to be taken, it has to be global action. Now, look at what's happened. People blame President Trump, but Trump has decreased pollution in his country by 10%, while China and India have increased by 800 and 720%. So, the minister from Grenada, Simon Stein, he spoke for the high ambition coalition, and he put the blame for COP failures on USA, Brazil, Australia. Now that is something which is absolutely unimaginable. They are not blaming the largest polluters, which they should. The fact that my origin is from India does not blind me to the fact that India is the second largest polluter in the world and China is the largest polluter in the world, and their pollution levels are rising. Look at the poor residents in the cities of India, which for the last 3 months have been living in hell. Chinese people cannot afford to go out without a mask on their face. And then whom do you blame? USA, which has reduced its level of pollution. And look at the role of the European Union's lead negotiator. There is no way to accept a compromise and jeopardize environmental integrity, he says. We need to be ambitious and get zero emissions by 2050. Now, is he living in La La Land that is talking of the zero emission by 2050? This is not possible for the simple reason that the globe is not a level playing field. Let's be very clear. The countries which are developing, which are ambitious, would have to go in for that. China is adding coal every year. India, as I said earlier, needs coal. It has to burn coal, pollution or no pollution, if it has to maintain its status as a developed nation and become a superpower as it's hoping to. Now, youth climate advocates have their own role to play. They had galvanized a worldwide urge surge in climate concern in 2019. Greta Thunberg, for all the stupidity and all the coaching that she had, did create waves. Let's not deny it. And she did create waves because of the help given by the media, because her mentors, her masters, were also controlling the media. So when Catherine Grothier says that our future is literally at stake, we don't have any other choice than trying all the possible means. There is a logic, but they have a choice. They have a choice to be realistic. They have a choice to give the air credits. Why not? And the 2019 UN climate negotiations are widely expected to be a big jump when they fail. Now, what happens in 2020? How can the main objectives be discussed? Because the ambitions of those growing countries would grow. At present, the biggest polluters are, as I said, China and India. But let's not forget that South Korea, sorry, South Africa is rapidly catching up. And when South Korea comes up, the situation would not be better, it would be worse. Pakistan is very ambitious, and it has to be. Why should it not be? And this time pollution level in Pakistan was as high as it was in India. Lahore was practically engulfed in dust haze all the time. So the 2020, the countries which have agreed to ambition plans till now have not done it. Canada wanted to reduce, but its reduction is hardly 1%. It's much below what it had promised. Germany, USA, they have exceeded their goals, and yet we are blaming them. Now, let's look at the Canadian watchdogging the UN process, Catherine Abreu. She was very correct and justified in laying the blame on the big polluting countries, which have been able to make ruthless advance in fossil fuel industry's growth. But it's affecting us globally. Now, here is somebody who has talked sense and who has been talking sense. But she goes further and she says Canada's climate financial contributions need to be increased. That means what Trudeau is planning to enhance the carbon tax should be implemented. I fail to understand that why the global action cannot be against the polluters. Now let's come to the alleged obstructionists. The whole collision of the people, the apologies for the climate change were directed, all the arrows were directed at Brazil, Australia, and USA. And they were saying US role is galling because Donald Trump has pulled out of Paris Agreement. But as I said, yes, he has pulled out because he knew that these agreements have no meaning and they are lopsided. There's no deterrent in them. There's no teeth in them. There's no bite in them. So why have useless agreements? And what he has done is he has been able to effect decrease in the pollution levels. Brazil's Brasilia is called the Trump of the tropics, and they say that he is responsible for charging the Amazon rainforest. No logic. But then, since he's a conservative, he is a Trump ilk like Modi, so blame must be laid to them. And then, Australian delegation blatantly was following the bidding of the coal industry. Agreed. Population is choking in smoke in Australia. It is choking in China. It's choking in India. But then these countries have to use coal if they want to maintain the level of the growth which they are having. And then imagine India is today number one in the green energy. That nobody can deny. But then the need of the energy is so much. It's power hungry. I mean the power, not the political power, but the power, energy needed for the industry. And even then, outside the triad of the obstructionist, I call it a triad, and it's a wrong thing to call them, as I said, they are not the only guilty. The negotiations were poorly handled. And the main fault goes to Canada, which poses to be a champion, why it should not be. As a matter of fact, Canada is following the principle of robbing Peter to pay Paul. What Canada should have done is that they should have blamed the actual people polluters. And Canada dares not annoy China. Let's be very clear. Since it cannot blame the polluter, it taxes its own people. Now, as I said, the biggest blame should go to Chile for failure of this meeting in Madrid. Shockingly, Chile was to host this meet and failed to do so because of the local situation. But then presidency remained with it. Little was done up to line up the issue. They were more concerned with their own country's problems, but they didn't want to let go of the presidency, and they did do nothing to delineate what should be. The leadership was missing. They did not line up the issues. They did not troubleshoot the predictable sticking points in advance. And once the negotiations were underway, it was impossible to track the goings on. It was all haphazard. The most opaque COP I have ever seen, says Elizabeth May, and I fully agree with her. It was a chaotic condition. And then May says that upside down punting, Article 6, no decision at all is preferable to a bad decision. We did not end up with the rules that would damage the whole Paris effort. That is saying something which doesn't hold water. Now, let's be very clear. It has been made clear that there is no room for ethics in the international negotiations. The people need to carry on the work which negotiators cannot. And this was the statement of Chief Dana of the First Nations. And I fully agree. The politicians who are leading the nations are incapable and they have their own agendas. They are not having the agenda of the country or of the people of the globe. They have their party agendas and their personal agendas. And since they have their own partisan agendas, they do not contribute in a major manner to the growth of the global fight against pollution. As a matter of fact, this was not just a disaster, it was a demoralizing and enraging end. And then we see if these are to be made, why spend millions of dollars on these jamborees, which are going to have a disastrous end? It's particularly unfair to Spain, which had to host the country and it was not ready. The riots in the Chile forced Madrid to host it, and they were not prepared. They didn't have time. They could not carry out and then they were not the president. This is something ridiculous. You're hosting in a country, and the presidency is with another country, which again is not prepared. So heads of the states arrived along with the federal and the subnational ministers, thousands of negotiators. Entire city was ready, but they lacked the infrastructure. They lacked the will. They had no guidelines to go. And result is unwept, unsung, unhonored. It met its grave. And now the Canadian negotiators return to Ottawa. They have to decide whether or not to approve the trade sources, limited mega mine in Alberta of sand. That's the most important. What about tax resources mine? That's important. Would it not contribute to pollution? The next big test is going to be whether Trudeau government's commitment to climate action would leave us energized or enraged. I'm enraged. Are you not? And if you are not, think about it. We spend millions, millions, millions of dollars on useless things. We tax our people for no gain. We have, despite all the efforts, we have not been able to meet the targets promised. While we met the targets when Prime Minister Harper was there. That was the only time when our march was much more effective. It would be much better to pay attention to our efforts than to waste money in these wasteful global jamborees because their only benefit is to give waste money on the jaunts of the political leaders, which doesn't affect the common people. And sooner we realize that action would not be enough unless the big polluters are compelled to join, and there's no hope for that. Think about it.